feel like I've been slacking with the top 5 lists lately. I just haven't bothered with them, you know? Just haven't been a thing. But we're gonna get back to it with some mad science, unchecked intellectual prowess. You may think that there should be limitations to the human mind, but you fools! You can't stop the march of progress at whatever cost, especially in the air. These are 5 more planes that are basically just mad science experiments. The Edgley EA7 Optica. That kind of looks like a bug. Like a giant bug, but a bug. Definitely weird looking. Though, admittedly, this is probably the most vanilla choice I put on this list. Because it is, at the end of the day, a plane. But a very specialized one. Also, the only entry on this whole list that was actually successful. The project that spawned this thing dates back to the UK in 1974 with Edgley Aircraft Limited. Obviously, it looks pretty friggin' weird. Its configuration is highly unusual. With a fully glazed forward cabin, it looks more like a helicopter's than a plane's, and that's the point. Basically, the whole idea of this aircraft was for scouting purposes, as well as to combine some of the benefits of a helicopter with a plane. It was viewed as a low-cost alternative to helicopters, because regardless of what kind of helicopter you wind up getting for whatever purpose, helicopters are friggin' expensive. They always have been, and probably always will be. But planes tend to be a bit more economical. The Optica was meant to not only give a lot more view for the crew on board, but also to be exceedingly, ridiculously slow. Unreasonably slow for a plane, if I'm being honest. The cruise speed of this thing is only 81 miles per hour, 130 kilometers per hour, 70 knots, that's it. And the stall speed is 67 miles per hour. Seriously, most of y'all are probably speeding down your highway at a faster speed than this thing would stall at. It's insane. But it is beneficial, because if you're trying to look around for something very specific, well, I mean, the Optica won't actually move that fast over the target. However, manufacturing this thing has been a technical nightmare. Not because of the plane, but because of financing. There's been so much corporate mismanagement surrounding the Optica, it's outrageous. As well as, frankly, just sabotage. 10 of the Opticas were destroyed in the factory due to an arson. But they are still trying to make it a bit more prevalent. As it stands, there's only 12 currently in existence. So if you see one, it would definitely be a rare sight. But they might become more popular over time, assuming they actually manage to make any more. The Ryan X13 Vertigette. Oh no, not another one of these! Well, okay, in Ryan Aeronautical's defense, their take on the VTOL concept that was being toyed around with back in the 1950s is a bit more practical, at least in terms of overall design. We have a small delta wing aircraft here, though it is a tail sitter, which is always concerning. But definitely not the most radical example when compared to some other ones I've talked about before. The whole point of the Vertigette was, naturally, to demonstrate the ability of a pure jet to vertically take off, hover, transition to horizontal forward flight, and vertically land. Okay, we'll get right on that. But 2 were built, and, well, they actually kind of did work. And it was demonstrated multiple times. But the United States Air Force never pushed the project forward because at the time they just didn't really have a requirement for it. The Air Force has never really needed the whole VTOL thing. They never really jived with that. The Navy and the Marines love those, but not the Air Force. So the whole project wound up being cancelled. But fortunately, both prototypes wound up surviving. One is located at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, on loan from the San Diego Air and Space Museum, and the other is at the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio. So you can still see this kooky little aircraft if you want. The Blériot 125, or BI-125. I don't know how I'm saying that right. It's French, and French hates me. But I'm just gonna call it the 125. What? Wait, no, there's two separate in the props in the middle. I don't... Listen, France, what were you doing? Well, okay, in their defense, this was developed in the late 20s, early 30s, and we were still kind of experimenting with what worked when it came to planes. The technology was still fairly young, definitely more developed than it had been, but still fairly young. Really, the weird thing about this one is just the overall layout, where the engine is, where the cockpit is, and where the passengers sit, because that's all separate. This was meant to be a French airliner, and it accommodated 12 passengers in separate twin fuselages. In between those two fuselages, also it's weird to say fuselages, because you usually don't have to say that plural, but anyway, they shared a tailplane and a high wing. The center section carried a nacelle that contained an engine at both ends, as well as two props, one for pulling and one for pushing. And the crew compartment was also in the middle. So basically, 6 passengers sat on each side, making a total of 12, plus the crew in the middle, all separated into separate components with 2 different engines, one for pushing, one for pulling. What? Why any of this? Let's start there. This is ridiculous, and no, it didn't work. It was tested. It was flown in March of 1931, but it was discovered that it had really poor flight characteristics. The thing could fly, but not particularly well, and that was obviously deeply alarming for a passenger airliner. They made several modifications to try to make it functional, but nothing ever really improved it to any significant degree. The whole thing was a dead end, and it never achieved flight certification. The project would wind up being abandoned in 1933, and a single example was scrapped. The Ryut 102T Aileron. France! What? Why? No! Stop everything! What are you doing today? Why are you here again? Ugh. What have you brought me? Why are you like this? You make good planes now. You made the Rafale. You made the Mirage. You also made this. Goodness. Okay. So the Aileron, I think is how you say it. Or Aileron. Probably not, because it's in French. I don't care right now. Okay, that thing is an ornithopter. What the heck is an ornithopter? Okay, an ornithopter is a type of aircraft that gets its lift by flapping its wings. Naturally, as you can imagine, the whole point is to mimic birds. But that idea is not only... Well, there's a few problems with it. For one thing, it's exceedingly difficult to implement in a mechanical sense because of the way birds work. But also, it's woefully unnecessary. You don't need to flap the wings to make them fly. That's not needed. It's not worth the technical headache to do. But in the early days, there were several designers who felt this was better, even though we'd already proven that regular planes were just fine. But one of those designers was René Ryut. This was not the first time he had done this. He'd been toying with ornithopter designs since 1913. Mind you, the Aileron was put together in 1937. René, give it up, man. I know they say follow your dreams, but it ain't working, my guy. And no, he didn't work. His first attempt wound up crashing immediately, but he pressed forward, making larger and larger models, eventually proposing his ideas to the Service Technique de l'Aéronautique, or the Aeronautics Technical Service, which was a state body in France. The STAE decided to throw him a bone and let him work on some of his ideas with extra funding, and I did help him develop an experimental prototype. The Aileron was made of tubular steel covered with aluminum, and a closed cockpit, and it used a small V-twin engine installed behind the pilot, and it drove not a propeller, but two pairs of flapping wings. Excellent, excellent. I'm sure nothing could possibly go wrong here. Interestingly, it did actually have retractable landing gear, which was pretty cool for that time. I mean, that was something that was coming to the fold, so it wasn't like all his ideas were bad. Eventually, they started wind tunnel testing in 1938, first with the wings simply stationary and then flapping. And quickly it was realized that this was not going to work. It never flew, or even attempted to fly, because the wind tunnel tests, like the basic tests that every aircraft is subjected to before they actually, try to fly them, broke the aileron. The wings snapped under the rigors of the wind tunnel, combined with the act of flapping them. It was too much. They weren't strong enough to take it. The project was canceled after this. They didn't attempt to rebuild it. And no, that's it. We're out. We're done. No more. I'm sorry, Renee. We don't make planes flap their wings for a reason. The Papeny Gyrop, or Gyropter. I swear to you, if you don't get the heck out of my house right now, we're gonna have problems. Usually, beyond my inability to actually pronounce anything in your language, we usually don't have these problems, but you're giving them to me today. And I just need you to know that it's time to stop. Now, and I'm sure most of you are saying, why did you even put this on the list, Darkness? That's popular science. They post nothing but wacky stuff. This is just a silly concept that never actually was built. You fools! Yeah, it was! Oh boy! Someone sat there and said, this is a good idea. In a similar case to the helicopter, where someone looked at the following seeds and said to themselves, hey, that's how we make things fly. Well, the designers of this particular creation took that very, very literally. Technically, this is not a plane. Technically, you should call it the first air-jet-powered helicopter. Also, I don't care. What the heck is that? Construction of Papeny and Rioli's Gyropter began in February of 1914, completed by June of the same year. The prototype was named Chrysalis. Constructed of molded wood, which would have been very normal for the time, it was, admittedly, very well built for what it was. It was very sleek and well engineered. But the problem with it was obviously, what they're trying to engineer is a really stupid idea. This was never going to work, and I promise you, it didn't. I mean, for one thing, you're probably thinking, how does it even balance itself? Well, the blade, being way longer, obviously needed a counterbalance, so they put the engine on the other side. An 80 horsepower, 9-cylinder Aileron rotary engine, to be precise. The pilot would occupy a nacelle between the blade and the engine, and it didn't have landing gear in the traditional sense. The structure beneath the pilot's nacelle was designed to support the machine while it was both on the ground, as well as enable it to float on the water. So, okay. There is obviously quite a bit of thought put into this, and I applaud that. Also, no. Oh boy. The engine would be started by using a pulley system, like it's a friggin' lawnmower, and the engine would drive a fan that produced an output of just over 250 cubic feet of air per second. The air, combined with the engine's hot exhaust for thermal expansion, would be directed through the propeller's blade and exit the blade's tip through a nozzle on the trailing edge. So, yeah, in effect, this thing was a tip jet. The gyroscopic force of the motor would lift the blade into a positive angle of attack and allow it to be, well, stable. The nacelle that carried the pilot would be centered on the axis of rotation. But how were they supposed to control it? Okay, they used 2 foot pedals. One pedal opened a valve to admit air into the blade. The second pedal allowed air into an L-shaped tube above the craft that served as a rudder for directional control. Okay. The L-shaped tube was actually directed by the pilot. He could move it independently as well. So basically, he was pushing himself along like a ship's rudder? I mean, I guess in a similar sense, but not really. Yes, no, I think you get it. Despite being completed in 1914, they couldn't actually test it till the following year due to the outbreak of World War I. Obviously, things were a bit busy in Europe at about that time, but they did finally test their absolute madness. And did it work? Well, sort of. On March 31st, 1915, they decided to test the craft over water, which, thank you for that, Lake Circe to be precise, and attempt to get the thing into the air. To begin with, there was a problem. They actually couldn't get the rotor to spin fast enough. They only got it up to 47 RPM. They had calculated they needed at least 60 RPM for a proper liftoff, so it didn't exactly really get into the air in an official capacity. But even if it had, well, it probably shouldn't have, because it would have been wildly, outrageously dangerous. It was obvious, even though it wasn't completely lifted off, that the whole thing was a balanced nightmare. There was no control. France's military decided that there was no application where this thing could really help them in the current war effort, so they halted any further evaluation, focusing more on things like biplanes, which were working, not whatever this was. Helicopter technology would not really get going for several more decades after this. And in a way, I kind of feel bad for the designers, because they kind of had the right idea, just their execution reeked of madness. The prototype, by the way, remained at Lake Circe until she was sold for scrap in 1919. A shame, because, look, you want to see that in a museum. Like, it's ridiculous, but that's why you want to see it. Come on! Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fun farewell.